So now we're going to get into more of the practical, but we needed to tie in the spiritual. You cannot separate the two. And I want to say that Dana and I, so you know, this is the first time we have taught any of this. And so, a seminar anyway, we've taught individual classes with these things, but to put it together as a seminar, so you are our first trial to do this, so please bear with us. But I guess if I'm going to say we are qualified for this is because we have had the great privilege and opportunity to live this lifestyle. And so, but we didn't live it during a time when we couldn't buy or sell. So there is a difference. If we had it in need and we didn't have it, we could go get it. But we're not going to have that opportunity. When Dana and I first moved to Kentucky, we decided to build our own house. And so we learned the skills to do that. We learned a lot, and it was such a blessing. But in that whole process, well, we didn't have running water for a while. We didn't have electricity for a while. So a lot of these things we're going to teach you, we had to live. So we can tell you from firsthand, it really was a blessing. It really was. You learn to appreciate things in such a way that you don't. We take things for granted. We flip a switch or we lift a knob and we've got everything we want. But we have to have a different mindset. And so we're going to look at some things that will help us to get through this time, because remember again, this is going to be a worldwide event. There's going to be calamities, disasters, diseases. People have practical needs. And if we are not prepared, we're going to be scrambling for our own selves to get through this time. So the better prepared we are, the better help we can be for those who truly didn't know our message and didn't have the opportunity to prepare. So we're going to stop here. We're going to take a break, get out, stretch, get some fresh air, get some water, and then we'll come back. Grab our seats. And I want to take this opportunity to let you know that if you have a question while we're presenting, just please raise your hand, or even if you have a comment, you might have experience in something that we're talking about that would be helpful. Please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to get to you. Brother Champion has a microphone because this is being recorded, and we want others here also to hear your question. So if we answer that question, so everybody will be able to hear. So please just raise your hand and let's get to our seats and we'll get started.
Okay, I want you to take just a minute. I want you to take a minute and think about, when was the last time you went to town to buy stuff? Last week? Walmart, Lowe's, grocery store, Home Depot. What are the things that we most commonly buy when we go, say, to Walmart? Food, things that perish with the using. Think about paper goods, paper towels. Think about matches. You use them and they're done, right? What about Band-Aids? You use them and they're done. You don't reuse Band-Aids, right? Think about shoelaces. I have a shoelace that's about to break on one of my boots here. But I'm cheap, so I'm waiting until it breaks to replace it. But I have a pair. What are some things that you think you really need on an ongoing basis that you would not be able to buy under no buy, no sell? Anybody? Q-tips, good one. Okay. What will you do when you can't buy Q-tips? What's that? A twig? Oh, ouch. Okay. What will you do, ladies? Let's just be practical here. When your monthly time comes and you can't buy the female products. We're being very practical. We're all grown-ups here. Except the ones, and they don't really have a clue what we're talking about anyway. Think about those things. What are you planning to do when you cannot buy and replace those things? We're not going to buy enough paper towels to last us through this time. Not very practical. We're not going to buy enough toilet paper to last us through this time. So, what can we do practically to prepare for those kind of things that perish with the using? I heard somebody say soap, shampoo. What are you going to do when you can't buy it? How are you going to clean yourself? These are very practical questions. Can you see how real this is going to get when we cannot buy these things? So we need to start thinking about what we can do to replace these things. Of course, we didn't used to use throwaway paper towels. What did we use? We used, strips of sheets or whatever, and maybe Mom would serge the edge, and we would just wash them. Well, how are you going to wash when you can't buy soap? So these are very practical questions. To some degree, we can stock up on some of these things. We can learn to make them. We need to be able to find in nature the things that we need to replace what we use on a day-to-day basis. There is a plant. It grows here. I've seen it in the woods on Uchee Pines. It's called the yucca. Who knows what the yucca plant is? That is a very useful plant. It can be used for cordage. It can be used for fire starting. The root has something called saponins in them. It can be used as a soap. Okay? So God has not left us without resources in nature. We just have to learn to identify and use these things. Not only that, the yucca plant has on the stem, the stalk that comes up, it grows these beautiful white flowers, and if you've never eaten those white flowers on a yucca plant, when they're just fresh, just open, they are absolutely scrumptious. They taste like sunflower seeds. And so learn these plants. Plant these things in your yard, on your property, if you have a property. So, I just want you to think through how many times were you dependent on electricity, getting ready just today to come to this meeting? Ladies, did you blow dry your hair? Did you turn on a curling iron? How did you warm your food for breakfast? Or did you? How did you illuminate your room? How will you do that when you can't pay your electric bill? I think that we need to really think very candidly about these things. Where is your water going to come from? And water is one that my husband and I really, the experience that he and I had in Kentucky was my second experience living off-grid, so to speak. I lived that way for almost 3 years when I first moved to Kentucky. We had no indoor plumbing and no running water. And it was a challenge, but it was a blessing. It was a huge blessing. And so when we get to the part where we're going to talk about sanitation, I'll share more of that with you. But I just want you to think about these things. Where would I get my water from if I couldn't pay the electricity to run my water pump? Or if I couldn't pay my water bill to get municipal water? So my husband and I are going to go through what we know as survival priorities. And these are priorities for us right now, and they're going to be priorities for us when we cannot buy and sell, and they're going to be priorities for us when we move right into the wilderness experience. Okay? So these are things that are not going to leave us. They're things that we're going to need to learn to supply the need of in any situation. Okay, my husband is going to write on the whiteboard, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the most important priority for survival on a day-to-day, in the no-by-no cell, and when we go to the wilderness. Yes. Okay, he says water. Where's our microphone, our roving microphone? Okay, if you could, if you have an answer, raise your hand, and Brother Champion will put the microphone on you so that those who are listening online now or later on YouTube can hear. So he said water. There are 5 things. I see a hand in the back. I think she said
A shelter?
shelter. Is that what she said? Okay, so
Shelter is number 1.
yes. Bing. Okay, yes.
Food?
Food. Okay, that is one of the top 5. Okay, so we have water.
We're going to fill them in, but there is an order in priority that we want to put them.
Where's your microphone? He's not using his mic.
I tell everybody to speak into it, and we want to keep them in order of priority. Shelter is number 1, and once we get the 5 up here, we'll tell you why they're in that priority order.
Okay, shelter's number 1. You said water.
My son, what are you saying, kid? Who's number 1? What's number 1? God. You said God.
God.
Number 1.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Out of the mouth of little babies. Okay, that's overarching it all. Okay, so we have shelter, we have water, and we have food. Those are the 3 that have been named so far. Okay? What's that? I can't hear you. I see people, but what I need you to do is raise your hand. Brother Champion will put the microphone in your face so we can all hear you.
We did have food, correct? Okay.
We did have food. Okay, yes.
Medicine.
Okay, that's a very good one, and that is actually priority number 3. And it's not, we don't necessarily call it medicine, we call it health concerns. Okay? So what's missing from this list?
Heat.
What's that?
Heat.
Heat, okay? He said heat.
Heat. We
I will
call
accept
it
that. We call it fire.
fire.
Yes. When you turn on your light switch, that's fire. That's from electricity. So somebody, somewhere, there's some fire, there's some power, okay? So even today, we turn on the electric furnace, we turn on the electric stove to heat our food, to heat our homes. That's fire. That can be met by fire. Okay, we're going to break these down a little bit, and I think this is the order of priority. With the shelter, we're coming into the summer months now. Let me ask you a question, and raise your hand if you think you know. How cold of a temperature can you handle at night and not freeze to death if you don't have adequate shelter? Anybody want to venture a guess? There's a hand.
30 degrees.
About 30 degrees, he says.
Yeah, about 30 degrees.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. She said she thinks it depends on your health. That is a good point. Do you know that you can freeze to death if it's 60 degrees outside? You can freeze to death in 60 degrees. You can die of exposure, hypothermia. Okay? So don't think that just because we're praying that our flight be not in the winter or on the Sabbath, that we won't have to deal with this issue of shelter and the need for warmth, even in the summer. I have a hand here.
Yes, my question is, why is that at 60 degrees? Can you explain that?
Yes, because just think about it. If you're laying on the ground, that earth is pulling heat out of your body. If you sweat and your clothing is wet and you don't dry that out and you're trying to sleep at night and you don't have adequate shelter, the heat is just leaving your body. Okay? You have to be able to maintain your core body temperature. And whatever the temperature is outside, if you don't have adequate clothing and you don't have that metabolism in place, your body core temperature is going to go down, yes.
One thing that people tend to forget is wind, too.
Yes, good point. We forget about the wind. The wind, and it's, if you're from North Dakota, you know that's an issue, right, Brother Marvin? Yes. Wind is definitely an issue. It will take the heat right out of you. So, even in warmer months, we need to always keep these things in mind. The number one priority, if you find yourself in a survival situation, now what we're talking about is not necessarily survival, wilderness survival, although we are going to introduce some of those things. That's not the purpose of this seminar. We're simply trying to show you some things that we believe that you need to be thinking about when you cannot buy anything, when you cannot pay your bills, okay? Things, equipment that you need to have in place now. We have a little window of opportunity, and I believe that window is getting smaller by the day to purchase some key items that we're going to need for what's ahead of us. Okay, so priority number 1 is shelter. Priority 2 is water, health concerns, fire, and then food. Were you going to say something?
And we're going to break this shelter down. Most of us, when we think of shelter, we think of a physical structure. But it's more than that, and we're going to break it down into 3 areas. One is the structure itself, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit. But also, when we talk of shelter, we also need to consider clothing. Clothing is a part of our shelter protection. My wife is going to talk about that. And then there's also bedding.
I just want to say a quick praise the Lord, because they were given rain in the forecast all day today and all day tomorrow. So I just rejoice that the sunshine is coming out. So praise the Lord for that. Okay, let's talk a little bit now. I'm going to spin the first one on clothing, because this is our first barrier, right? This is the first thing that we have to maintain that core body temperature. I just want to show a few things. And I think that probably the two most important items that I have first are your feet and your head. Yeah. Always make sure that you have a good, warm wool. We call them togies in Kentucky. Make sure you got a good togie, a good stocking hat, okay? These are merino wool. I purchased some of my wool things from a company called Mountain Warehouse. They have good products, but I found better wool products at a company called Meri Wool, M-E-R-I Wool, W-O-O-L. Now, why do I like wool so much? I like to try as much as possible to stick with natural fibers, cotton, linen, wool, these types of things. Wool will actually insulate you even if it's wet, okay? So, we try really hard not to get wet, and if we do get wet, we want to dry out. And that's why, if I could just interject this here, if you, for instance, if this is going to be in your backpack, I have my extra clothing in a dry bag, so that if I fall in the creek or something, my clothing stays dry, my extra clothing, because you really need to keep your feet especially dry and warm. These are actually military socks. I'm wearing a pair. This is another pair. Do you remember the name brand of these? There is one name brand. It's called Darn Tough, like you darn socks. Darn Tough socks. They are really good socks. They're thick. They have ladies' socks that come all the way up to the knee, which I prefer. And so if y'all want to look at these, I can pass it around if that's an interest If you don't feel like you need that, that's fine. I'll just leave them up here. You can see them later. Okay, but it says Omni Wool on these socks. Omni Wool. Now, when you consider your socks, I really only wear boot socks. If you want to get those little ankle things, that's your business. But to me, that ain't a sock. Okay, a sock comes up to my knee. And so that's my personal preference. I feel like it gives me better protection. Whenever I get my socks, I'm going to wear them inside my boots. So footwear is not something that I chintz on. Okay, these boots right here were, when I bought them about 9 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, I think they were $185. These are military grade. This is what the soldiers use. These have 200 grams of insulation, and they're also waterproof. I've been in water up above the ankle, and they don't leak. These are very good boots. These are made by Belleville. They have the Vibram outsole, and I am telling you, I have put some serious abuse on these boots, and they have taken it. They've stood up to this. The only thing that I regret, I bought them larger than what I actually wear a 7.5. I bought an 8. If I did it over, I would buy an 8.5, because I'm going to put thick, heavy socks in there. Okay? And all my life growing up as a kid, I just knew I wore a 6.5 or 7. And then I would cram my socks in there and my feet would freeze. Even with nice warm socks and nice insulated boots, my feet were still cold. It was because I was buying my boots too small. You want to buy your boots at least a size larger. Some people buy them 2 sizes larger. That's a little much for me, but a good pair of thick, heavy wool boot socks and a good pair of heavy boots. I do have a pair of ladies' boots up here that I bought off of eBay. They were supposed to be a wide, and they were not, and I have wide feet. So if anybody wears a narrow, I have these for $35. They're not insulated, but they are waterproof. And these are also made by Belleville. These are excellent boots. They're just too narrow for me. Okay, so the head and the feet, you want to make sure that you have something wool, very good quality. This is not a place to chintz. Is this stuff expensive? Yep. I ain't going to lie to you. It's not cheap. But just think about, if I'm in a situation where I can't buy anything anymore, I might buy 3 pairs of Walmart underwear, long underwear, for the price that I could pay for one of these shirts from Mary Wool. But this thing is going to last, and it's going to keep me warm even if I sweat. Now here in Alabama, we have that damp cold. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? I've lived in North Dakota with my husband, and that's a seriously different kind of cold up there, okay? You cannot put enough on to stay out for any length of time without having to come in and warm up. It just gets crazy cold up there. But down here, where we have that cold, humid, wet, damp weather in the winter, I have worn this right here. I bought this one from, I think this came from Mountain Warehouse. It's a little bit thinner. I had this one on, I had this one on, and I had a polypropylene jacket, zip jacket, something similar to this right here. Okay? It was like in the low 30s, upper 20s outside, and we were outside working, and I was sweating. Okay? With just 3 layers and a very light coat. Okay? So layers matter. And Mary Wool is one of the best quality that I have found. I think a top like this is around $60. Okay? And they also have the bottoms. They have them for ladies. They have them for men. The waistband I like. It's covered. It's nice and easy. It doesn't choke you to death. And so these are Mary Wool. I think these are the mid-weight. long john bottoms, okay? And if you put a pair of these on and say maybe a pair of scrub pants or khaki pants or even blue jeans on under your skirt, ladies. I always wear a skirt, so I can really hide a lot of stuff under a skirt. I guarantee you I'm warmer than you fellas wearing pants, because I can hide lots of layers under there. So anyway, so those are some layers. If you want to look at these, you're welcome to. I like always to have something around my neck, and I just tie it, and then I've always got a scarf if I need to gather some berries, if I need to filter some water, or if I get something, my husband gets something in his eye, I can wet the corner and dig it out or whatever. These are just so useful. Doesn't have to be camo or whatever, but just a simple bandana, something like that. Very, very useful piece of clothing, okay? So I like to keep one of those. And then, of course, particularly if you're going to be working around any of these other things that we're going to talk about, you want a nice pair, excuse me, of leather gloves. Okay, these kind here, these are okay for like gardening and stuff, but you touch something hot with it, what's going to happen? It's going to melt, and that stuff's going to melt right to your skin, and that is not going to be, then you're going to have an injury to deal with, okay? So I don't recommend depending on these kinds of gloves when I can't replace it. These leather gloves are going to outlast these by far. These are nice for gardening. They keep your fingers, from getting wet so much and stuff. They have their place. But if I only have one pair of gloves, it's going to be a pair of leather gloves. They don't have to be white, but that's what they had at the store. Okay, were you going to say something?
I was going to say gloves too. I'm a glove guy. Like women are shoe people probably, but there's a glove for every occasion. And I think of gloves, when I'm sharpening knives or using knives or axes. And one big thing I would recommend, because we're going to be outdoors, is seriously, get a pair of gloves, because you have no idea how many little cuts you can get that can get infected. You have no idea when you're reaching into the wood piles to grab out this wood, what could be in there. Brown recluse, black widow. It would save you from many, many, many things. So please consider gloves. Very good. Very important.
Okay, another thing that I think that we need to always be thinking ahead, because once we go into the no buy, no sell time frame, if you don't have what you need when it's time to hit the woods, it's too late. So if you're going to get that stuff, you're going to need to get it now while we can buy and sell. I do have a rain suit that has pants and it has a jacket. Now, I intend during no buy or no sell, or when we have to flee to the wilderness, I intend that my legs are going to be covered, well covered, okay? So, and then I have a rain jacket that just, I don't want to unroll it too much because it never goes back in the bag quite the same way. But I do want to show you this. This is a military rain poncho. Honey, will you do the honors? Now I'm going to make some noise on my microphone here, but this is actually not the military grade. The actual military grade I can't wear. Can y'all still hear me? Why can't I wear it? Y'all see where this one comes on me? I'm like 5'1", and I'm stepping on this thing. Okay, so a poncho like this, I would have to put some paracord or something and kind of hike it up a little bit. Otherwise, I'm going to break my neck stepping on this thing. Okay, that's why I went ahead personally and got, the poncho and the pants, because a lot of people recommend these military rain ponchos, and we do have the actual military grade ones. I don't know where they are, but at any rate, if you're short like me, that's going to be tough to wear. You would break your neck stepping on it. You know, Amelia, you guys would have the same problem as me. So anyway, they are a good and valuable piece of equipment though, because you can use these for shelter. There's so many ways you can tie up a military poncho to make shelter. So it is a good item to have. Just know that you need to test your gear out before you actually need it. And while I'm talking about that, if you're going to get a good pair of hiking boots, and I like the military boots for that purpose. I don't know where that came from. That's in there. Don't buy these and put them in the closet and then pull them out when you need to run to the wilderness. Because you need to make sure that they're not going to cause a blister on you anywhere. Make sure that they're going to fit you well. Don't chintz on your footwear. These boots that I'm wearing right now, I looked them up and I think they sell for almost $350. There's a military surplus store in Columbus, Georgia, not too far from here. I paid $50 for these boots, and they look brand new when I bought them. If anybody wants to go there, we can make arrangements to take some folks there one day. You can get wool blankets, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. You can get these kind of boots, all kind of stuff that you can gear up with for way better prices if you don't mind using used equipment. Since I mentioned blisters, you want to make sure that you have some kind of treatment for a blister, because a blister, particularly if it gets infected, will put you out of commission. You're not going anywhere. I'm serious. It may seem like a small thing, but if you've never had a blister, a serious blister on your foot from ill-fitting shoes, it's not something you want to experience when you need to be on the move. Okay? So make sure that you have that. Okay, that's basically it for clothing that I wanted to cover. But now I want to cover a little bit on bedding. Again, if I could only have 2 bedding items that I could take with me to the wilderness that I would also use during no buy no sale, it would be a wool blanket and some type of tarp. This is actually an emergency blanket that could be used as a tarp. Okay? But we also have a free soldier tarp. We can open these up if you want to look at these later. Think about some tarp to keep yourself dry. And again, wool blankets will insulate even when they're wet. Another thing that I like about wool is they are fire resistant. They're not fireproof. But my love affair with polypropylene is kind of limited, because if you sit next to a campfire with this, what's going to happen in short order is it's going to be full of holes, full of little burn holes. And it could catch fire, yes. So I am steering more and more away from these synthetic things to natural fibers. Okay, it's not easy to do. It's a process. You see all the stuff we've got. We've been buying and testing gear for 7 years, I think. Yeah. And so hopefully the things that we've learned will help you not to make some of the mistakes that we've made. But this is not a mistake. A good military-grade wool blanket, if you want us to go with you, or you can, what's the name of the place?
Tier 1.
Tier 1 military surplus. And there are others. It's out Victory Drive, right?
I don't know all my roads yet, but I can drive you there.
If y'all want to go, just let us know and we'll arrange a day that we'll lead a convoy out there. $15. $15 for one of these. It's a very good investment. We bought several of them. Okay, let's just say you're on the move and all you have is your wool blanket and your tarp. You could lay down your tarp, lay down the wool blanket in there, and wrap yourself in like make a human burrito. Just kind of wrap yourself in like a burrito. You'll stay warm and you'll stay dry. And shelter is very vital for survival. So, okay, I think my husband is going to talk a little bit more about the actual physical shelter now.
And just so we're clear again, we're talking about no buy, no sell when we still can be in our homes. But there's going to be areas where we're going to have to know these wilderness skills, because remember, we have been counseled to move to the country. We should be living in the country, and the people that we need to reach are going to be living where? The majority of them? In the city. And so we're going to have to travel to them. We're not going to have vehicles to travel there. So we're going to have to hike. So we're going to need these little shelters as well to get us through. And what I want to look at is the actual physical structure. Now that can be anything, and I'll tell you, my great-grandparents, when they came from Germany to this country, on their travels out here, they had to tip their wagon over and live under their wagon in North Dakota. Part of that was in the winter, and if you've not been to North Dakota, I know Brother Marvin has. Yeah. It was a rough life. You know, we have to make adjustments to live this way, but that's how they lived. You know, we just have all the conveniences. But, and then my grandparents, they graduated from a wagon to a empty railroad boxcar. They didn't have running water, didn't have electricity. And so you can see that you can find physical structures in many places. And so I don't know how many of you own your own property and have your own homes. There may be some of you who don't. And so we want to be thinking in the lines, what would be the best option for me? Now, my wife and I, we used to have property, we used to have a farm, and we used to have camp meetings and do these things. But we don't now, and we're looking at being mobile. We're getting invitations to go here, there to speak, and so we're thinking of getting an RV. That could be an option. But we may need a place to park that. And so we're keeping in contact with friends who may have land that if we need to go somewhere, we would have a place to go. So we were thinking, as a people, this preparation is a must, really, because if you don't have property, I don't know very many of you, as a matter of fact, I don't know if any of you do or not, but what we want to let you know is that if we don't have property, we need to find maybe a portable option. That's why we brought this tent. We want you to look at this tent, this very portable. But when we go to a property, we want to make sure that we are an asset, not a liability. And so if we can provide our own shelter, if we know how to live with the few necessities of life and not be a burden to others, that's the goal. We want to be an asset, not a liability. That's why we're teaching these things. You may have to go to somebody else's property. And so we want to give you options to think about. The tent was one that we invested in, again, because we don't have a property. So we're thinking of the RV. We've got our tent already. But what other options do you think there are when you think of a physical structure? Now remember, this is probably for a year or two. We don't know exactly how long it will be. So when you think of, and we brought another little tent, a microfiber tent, to show you the difference. And you can tell us which one you'd rather live in. But what other options do you think there are? Anybody have any other ideas? A lean-to. A lean-to could definitely be an option, because you think about the times that we're going to be living in are going to be very difficult times. We may be very happy for a lean-to just to keep the rain off of us. And it depends what climate you're living in. You may need to shelter that lean-to in. But there are other options too. Our friends, the Bullers, they teach how to build shelters. Now they're more temporary, but they can be for a year or two. But they teach how to build teepees, yurts. Yurts are an option. People live in yurts up in Alaska. There are these pods you can rent. I've seen people turn them into homes. Now they're not as practical if you need to move them, but they're a quick way to set up a shelter. And again, the RV. But one thing that Dana and I, whatever you choose, we recommend in whatever aspect of this preparation work is to get yourself good tools. Don't buy cheap tools. Buy a tool that's going to last. Talk to people who do this kind of thing, who work with tools if you don't know what tools to get. Because you don't have to buy the most expensive tool. They're not always the best tool. But get a good quality tool, just like clothing. Get good quality clothing. And you're going to have to get used to it. Brother Marvin, I remember your testimony Sabbath. You said, they wanted me to dig all them holes? Yeah. We're going to have to get blisters. We're going to have to do some physical work because we won't have electricity. Now, I will say this. When we built our home, we did build in a solar system. And we had our own well. And we're going to talk about that more when we get to water. And so, if you have a solar system, a property with a solar system, wonderful. I don't know how long that's going to last because the components can break down, but if you have it, use it. And so, I'll be honest, I'm looking at something more portable because the work I do besides our ministry work, which really is part of our ministry, is I do handyman work, I do carpentry work, electrical, plumbing, so I need tools. And so I'm looking at buying a solar generator, something that can charge my batteries for my tools. Again, I don't know how long that will last, it will break down, but you're much safer if you just get hand tools. So start thinking of getting hand tools for every aspect of country living. We're going to talk more about other hand tools, but we're talking specifically for a physical structure, because you can build your own structure as well, but you're going to need hand tools. And we've got some over here. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking more about these things. These are tools that you should acquire, axes, hatchets. We've got also these saws that fold down to just slimline. But you're going to need whatever tools you would need, hammers, screwdrivers, different things to build a physical structure. But thinking in that term, if I don't have a piece of property, what is my best option? Because you're going to need someplace to stay. And also you want to be an asset, not a liability. And so tomorrow, or matter of fact, I think today, we're going to go out to the tent after we're done in here, and we're going to look at the tent. So if you have questions, prices, sizes, the company, or whatever, feel free to ask us. But this is an option that's one we brought, but you can think what shelter would work for me. If you already have a home, wonderful. Then get the hand tools that you're going to need for the different things that gardening or whatever. But remember, we're also here not just for ourselves. We're going to have to take people into our homes as well. We may need to build a shelter for them or open our home for them. So with that mindset, you can see that you're still, even if you have your own home, you're going to need tools. You will need them. So invest in good tools. Did you have anything else on shelter?
I just wanted to add, when the time comes when we may have to go to somebody else's property, every family needs their privacy. I don't care how good of a friend you are. The time is going to come when their family needs to be a family. When my family needs to be a family. We need to have those discussions that, you really don't want other ears to hear or what have you. And so I personally believe that we should not plan to just pile into our friend's house. If we can take this first priority of shelter with us so that we're more of an asset than a liability, that we can take skills. Knowledge weighs nothing. And if we learn how to do stuff, we can really be an asset to our friends when we show up there knowing how to garden, knowing how to forage for food in the wilderness, knowing how to identify herbs, wild edibles and medicinals. By the way, I brought this. I'm going to just pass this around because the last time we were here, I wanted to show you guys this. And this is all over the place. All of your, if you walk down this row here, there's a whole bunch of oak trees. especially after a good rain, you'll see this lichen on here. This lichen is called usnea. And I have a video on usnea on our YouTube channel. And if you've not become acquainted with usnea, this is called nature's doxycycline. And if I had known when I got Rocky Mountain spotted fever about this stuff, I don't think I ever would have gotten as sick as I did. So become acquainted, and we'll just pass it around so everybody can kind of look at it. I'm not going to go into key identification features because it is on that video. So I think next we're supposed to talk about water. You want to go ahead and go into this?
Yeah, and so now we're going to talk about water. Now again, if you have your own property, you probably have a water supply, but think, even if you have your own property and you have your water supply, where will you get your water if you don't have electricity? Does anybody have any thoughts? Microphone? Raise your hand.
I know when we had our place out there in Miller, Tennessee, one of the ideas that I thought of was catching rainwater.
Very good, catching rainwater. So that brings up another thing. If you're going to catch rainwater, you're going to need something to gather it in, right? So we're going to need containers as well to gather that water. Yes?
A well or spring.
A well or a spring, very good. Now, if you have a well, you're going to need electricity to get that water out of a well. And if you have a solar system, again, that will work. But a spring, if you know how to develop a spring, you don't need electricity for that. It will run and it will flow. And the idea is if you have a property with the spring above your home, that would be ideal. And it can flow into your home. So it might be a good practical skill to know how to develop a spring. Or if you don't have a property and you're looking for a property, one of the number one priorities for finding a property is water.
Another thing to remember, if you do have a spring head that's up on a hill, sometimes you can develop what's called a ram pump that does not run on electricity, and it can actually pump water. If there's not too much head, it can actually pump uphill. Another point that I wanted to bring out about the well, when we had our farm in Kentucky, we of course were off grid. We had a solar system, and the solar system would run our well pump. But we also put what was called a simple pump down in that well, which is a hand pump. Okay, now let me just give you a reality check on this hand pump thing. Whenever we would have guests, this was before we got the electricity, they'd be in there just running the water and washing the dishes, and I'm standing there, and I would run outside and pump water. And I would come back in, and they're running the water, and I'm like, pump, 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 run back in, and they're doing stuff, and I'm back and forth with these guests who had no clue what they were doing. Every single drop is precious. My husband, he's got bigger muscles than me. He would take 5-gallon buckets and go dip out of the creek and put up on the porch to flush our toilets. We didn't dare flush the toilet with water that we had to pump. And here's some perspective. Ladies, give me a guesstimate here of how many loads of laundry you do in 1 week. In a day. My sister had 7 kids. She called her laundry Mount Washmore. So I would really, with my husband doing carpentry and stuff, I had to wash every day. 1 load of laundry, 1,000 strokes on that simple pump. I got tired of pumping water. So we got a well pump. So that is reality, okay? That is reality. You use a lot more water than you think you do. And so one of the things that I believe we can start doing now is training ourselves to be a little more conservative with water. We are very wasteful. Who are we to think that we really deserve a hot shower 15-minute long, 10-minute long. This is just not reality for most of the world, okay? We laugh, but it's true. We have become very spoiled with our lavish water use, okay? So we really need to think about, how much water we really need, okay?
And that's why we're having this, because it's planting seeds. It takes a different mindset. It really does. And for me, I would watch people, they wanted to help us, and so they're doing dishes for us, and they're leaving the water run, and I would go over and turn it off, and they would look at me, and I'm like, you want to go out there and pump a while? Yeah. But anyway, you can get a simple pump. Now, a simple pump is the one that we got. They're very expensive, but they're high quality. But they're not meant to supply a house with water. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is for emergency uses. Now, you can find other well pumps, hand pumps, that are designed for more amounts of water. Look for those. If you do have a well, like you mentioned, sister, I take that back. You don't need electricity. I forgot about the hand pump that we used to have. Yeah. So
and you can draw it out with a bucket, but hey, you better have some muscles. Or you better have a pulley system set up. Because when I was a kid and we first moved to the farm, we had I don't think it was about a 2-gallon bucket, something like that. And you start lifting 2 gallons from down in a well, how much does a gallon of water weighs? 8 pounds, right? So you start pulling that up like this, you better have some serious shoulders, because by the time you get about halfway, your arms are going to be trembling, okay? So we're spoiled, y'all. We're spoiled, okay?
And if you are looking to get a property and you want a well, there is different wells that you can get. A drilled well is typically a 6-inch casing where you would need a pump, whether it be hand or electric. You can also get a bored well. They can make them bigger, and they're not as deep. But then you may have to purify. And I did. I really had a great privilege, too, staying with my grandmother. She didn't have indoor plumbing. We had to haul water to the house. My aunt was the same way. So we got to learn that you had to go get what you were going to drink. And you didn't have a toilet in the house. You went out to the outhouse. And so those were all good skills as a young boy that I got to experience. And those times are coming back again, but we want to make it, I don't want to say as easy as we can, but you know what? The times that are coming are going to be difficult enough. The more prepared we are, the less stress it will be on us. And again, there are others who did not know to prepare. We need to be ready for them as well. So other places we can get water is a creek. We had a creek, and that's where I gathered our water for our toilet. I would go out with the buckets and scoop them up, set them on the porch, and as we would need them, we'd dump them in the tank. We did have a toilet, but we just didn't have running water. And we could still flush it because we had a septic system plumbed in. But anyway, you could have ponds. Okay, but then we get to the point of purification. If we want to drink this water, how are we going to purify it? I hear something. Raise your hand. We'll get a microphone.
You could get a potable filter. They have this filter I saw online.
Okay.
Water.
Filters. Speaking of filters, now has anybody heard of the Berkey filter system, the Berkey waters? Yeah. Wonderful systems. And those are an option. But if you're going to do it, I would suggest do it now and get the larger one that you can get. We had just ordered filters, fluorine and charcoal filters for ours, and the prices are going up. So get extras. Again, we don't know how long this is going to be, but that is a great option. You can put that water in there. It will take out certain contaminants, but still, depending where you get your water from, you still may have to do further purification, but that is a good option. Yes. Okay, microphone, and then we will show you. We want to get to that too. So the Berkey is more of a home system, but again, we may be traveling to the cities. We're going to need other options. Yes.
Yes, I was about to say they also have some straw that are like filtering. Yes, this one.
There are life straws. Now, we have several examples. Do you have that? Oh, here. This is a Katahdin. This one can handle up to 13,000 gallons. It has a ceramic filter, and it's unique, if you want to open that up. It works the same as these other life straws. You can take these and stick them right in the water wherever you are, and you can drink right out of these. You can also put water in these. There's filters in these. It's a Sawyer water bottle. Now, I'm not too favorable in this because it's plastic. But anyway.
I forgot to bring my stainless steel water bottle. I know some of y'all have them. If you get a stainless steel water bottle, make sure that it's not insulated. You want a single wall, because then you can purify your water in a campfire in that stainless steel water bottle. Okay, if it's insulated, you'll ruin it. You can't do that. Okay.
And I think that is the safest method, as my wife was saying. Get containers, boil your water, bring it to boiling. You don't have to boil it for any amount of time. Just bring it to boil, and it will purify the water. But this, I mentioned, and I want to show you because this is a very good option, not for a household again, but if you are traveling anywhere with however many people.
Hose.
But anyway, if you want to hold that, there is a hose that attaches to the top here. This, it has a float and a weight into it. So you just simply drop it in the water, and this you pump. It's very smooth pumping. Again, 13,000 gallons it can go through, but it depends, you know, how contaminated the water is that you're using. And then this hooks to the top of it, and you can fill it into any container and drink out of it. And Katahdin is the brand. But there are many others. There's Sawyer, there's the mini life straws. You can come up and look at them later too. We have other examples up here. But when it comes to water, we know that we can only go for just a few days at the most, depending on the climate, without drinking water. So we need to make sure that we understand how to have good drinking water. But water is used in so many aspects of our lives. You think of bathing, you know, and bathing is very important because it helps to control the temperature of your body. So having clean skin. But wound care, to wash out wounds, cooking, toiletry, washing clothes. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for needing water. I was surprised when I saw how many gallons we use in a month when I used to live in the city. Thousands of gallons. We don't even think of it. But those things are going to change, and so we need to be as conservative as we can. And we're going to talk separately in our next section here. We're going to take a break after this, and when we come back, we're going to talk about bathing, wound care, how to do this with minimal amounts of water. So water is a great priority. You can also build your own charcoal and sand filter to run the water through. This will just basically get most of the particulates out of the water. But with what we're dealing with today, you think of it. Many of the fields that grow crops, what do they do with those fields to keep the weeds down? Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. They're spraying all kinds of chemicals. My uncle was a farmer back in North Dakota. He just passed away a few months ago. Anyway, he told me that when he first began farming, he did conventional farming. He said he used to put on about 8 quarts of chemical per acre. That's a lot. I was shocked. He said that was 20 years ago. He says, I'm putting on about 32 quarts an acre because all of the pests, whether they be plant or insects, are building up a resistance and a tolerance to these things. So they're having to put more and more of these things onto the crops. And so you think about that. That stuff is going to be in our water. So we need to be thinking of that. We don't want to be putting that stuff into our bodies. So water is of utmost. We need to focus on water. But were there any questions?